I think what he means by with like LeBron is the fact that he's been so consistent from when he started in the league at 19 to now. Because like if you look at his stats, like every single year he's like 26, 7, and 7. And it's been, I mean, from his early 20s all the way to his 40s. He's played 23 seasons now, and it's just like every season, even as he enters into like the twilight of his career, he's still like a really, I would still say he's like a top 15 player in the league still, maybe top 20. And so he's still like super consistent. I think LeBron's longevity is what we can appreciate. If we're going to have a GOAT debate for LeBron, like him being as great as he's been for as long as he's been, great. But again, if we're going to compare it to other leagues, the NBA is, I mean, the NBA can be physical in the playoffs, but NBA physicality compared to ice rinks with NFL physicality with people who are fighting each other, literally throwing punches at each other. Like the NHL and what Alex Ovechkin did, become the greatest all-time scorer in NHL history, is a massive accomplishment. Because not only is Alex Ovechkin the greatest goal scorer of all time, but it's like if you have a linebacker and the quarterback ultimately with one player, because he's one of the most physical players of all time. He leads the NHL, I believe, all time in NHL hits. Like,
Really?
yeah, he's in the top 5 at
Dang.
least. So not only is he a physical player who brings the intensity for the Capitals, but also he's the greatest goal scorer of all time now, and breaking a record that like nobody thought was ever going to happen. He just was consistently scoring 50 and 60 goals over 20 years. Like, I think what Alex Ovechkin's done is honestly pretty unprecedented, especially because he's doing it with one team. He's won a Stanley Cup, and he's just been consistent to a level with a sport that kind of chews their players out ultimately.
Yeah, especially with the sport as physical as hockey. Like a show, like it frustrates. This is what like frustrates me about a show like First Take is they add these topics that they don't know anything about. Like I'm not like a hockey fan. Like I watch the NBA more.
Yeah.
Like I appreciate hockey. I like watching the like NHL playoffs like a lot, and I feel like it's really competitive there. But like I understand that it is a way more physical sport than the NBA. You're essentially playing a sport where you're fighting each other and you're getting in fights on ice and you have the same amount of games as the NBA. So I'm like, for me, like NHL player, like Ovechkin has played more games over the past few years than LeBron James, which was the point. And like, sure, LeBron had that dominant run where he made it to 8 straight finals, but like Alex Ovechkin's longevity in a sport this physical, I feel like, is a lot more impressive than LeBron because LeBron James has load managed. That's not really a thing in hockey. And then him also breaking that goal scoring. I feel like hockey is just a much harder, at least physically sport, and it's more mentally and physically draining than the NBA is, where LeBron can just take a night off if he wants to. He can say, "Oh, I have soreness in my calf, so I'm not going to play for 2 weeks," in a stretch where LeBron had previously posted about the schedule. Like, how could we have like 8 games in 14 days, and then suddenly he had a mystery injury and sat out for 2 weeks in the stretch he was complaining about? Like Ovechkin doesn't pull that shit.
No, it doesn't. I think just like the physicality of the NBA compared to NHL, like it's a totally different sport. If we're talking about the GOAT debate in hockey, like again, I followed hockey very closely back when I was younger, but I don't really follow hockey like I do. The way that it seems like, just quickly looking at Gretzky and Alex Ovechkin's stats, Wayne Gretzky had a higher peak where he was scoring like 70, 80 goals a game a season, but Ovechkin is averaging 50 goals a season, which 50 goals is like throwing for, I would say, like 40 touchdowns in the NFL. So it'd be like if Brady was consistently throwing like 40 to 45 touchdowns a season, which is extremely impressive, especially because he started as like this young prodigy, basically, made it and won multiple MVPs. Like the fact that he's still playing, and I mean, this year he scored 42 goals and he's still on pace to score more. Like this guy is absurd historically. And honestly, like haven't followed hockey like I used to, but Alex Ovechkin, like you could put him in the GOAT conversation if you wanted to. And for longevity wise, like there's not a lot of other players in any sport that we can compare it to, except for like LeBron and Tom Brady, ultimately.
Yeah, and like I feel like I guess my biggest problem with this though is like not the GOAT conversation and then comparing. You want to compare each other, whatever, but PK Subban walked straight through them, and you could tell he actually watched the NBA. You could actually tell he knew who LeBron James was, where it seemed like Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharp had no idea who Alex Ovechkin was, and their ghostwriters gave them some notes before the show, and then suddenly they're screaming about, oh, LeBron James is better than Ovechkin. How dare you say that? And then PK Subban walked through them without blinking. I went through the comment section. Everyone's like NBA fan here, but yeah, PK Subban totally walked through them and cooked on this. Like, it just feels embarrassing because everyone watching that knows that Stephen A and Shannon Sharp don't watch hockey, yet you add a topic into your show where you're comparing two players. You said, I don't really follow hockey. I don't really follow hockey, but I at least respect how physical it is to not say that what LeBron's longevity is more impressive than what Ovechkin has done. Like, I respect hockey, like, and the physicality of it, and I respect it enough to, like, I don't watch hockey, so I can't really compare them. But like, you put this topic on your show where you clearly can tell that neither Stephen A or Shannon Sharp know what they're talking about, but I actually felt like PK Subban like actually had an understanding of the NBA versus hockey, where it's like, why is this a topic? It feels embarrassing and it just felt disingenuous.
Yeah, I don't understand why they do this. This is one of the probably most annoying things about First Take, and why I don't think people appreciate it like they used to, because you're also arguing it with, like, you're taking a side of something that I don't think anybody at a bar is going to argue. If we were at a bar in any city in the country right now, and we were to ask, like, what sport is more physical to spend 20 years in, the NBA or hockey, nobody's going to argue that the fact that Alex Ovechkin, who, by the way, has consistently played every game for the most part each year of his career in
He's
a
missed
league,
35.
huh?
He's missed 35 games over his 20-year career.
Yeah, exactly. He's missed what you just said, 35 games over his entire career in a sport that's essentially the NFL on ice skates. Like, nobody in their right mind, except for First Take argues shit that nobody thinks. Like, it's not in the same reality as this current reality that we live in. Nobody's going to argue that the NBA is not nearly as physical, not nearly as demanding. Plus, their stars at any point can take a day off or a week off, or ultimately they don't have that same, I don't want to say like passion, but they don't have the same tenacity that hockey players have. Where Ovechkin consistently scoring 50 goals, consistently being one of the most physical players, not only as a goal scorer. So, like, if we were to talk to anybody at a sports bar in this country, nobody's going to argue what Ovechkin's doing is more impressive, ultimately. Not even to minimize LeBron in any way either.
No, it's not to minimize LeBron, and it's not the fact that Ovechkin is a hockey player that has broken the points record. It's the fact that he's the hockey player who's broken the hits record, you said, who's one of the most physical players, and he's an enforcer, and he's a player that people fear late into his career in his 40s. Like, and that's what PK Subban was explaining here. And like, he just like confidently like walked through them. He's like, yeah, like, I know you don't know what you're talking about, so this is like pretty light work for me. And he's like, uh-huh. But like, it just felt like he was super respectful about it, and then just the way they shout at people, it's just like, it's super disrespectful, and it feels like the type of show that just normalized like everyone creating content around just casually disrespecting athletes for no reason, and like in a creative or funny. It's just straight up disrespectful.
It is disrespectful. I think also, like, if we were to look at that conversation that they're having too, like, what happens when you're comparing what LeBron's doing in the NBA and what Ovechkin's doing, and then ultimately, I think they lumped Brady in there as well. Is like, I feel like saying like which one is more impressive than the other also kind of minimizes what each of these players have done in their respective sport. Each sport carries its own sort of stress and burden to it, and comparing like instead of framing it as is what Ovechkin's doing more impressive than LeBron, the conversation should be more about like, is what does this ultimately, like, even if they had the GOAT conversation with him and Gretzky, like, that's more exciting to me than saying like what he's done in 20 years in the NHL, is it more than what LeBron's done in the NBA? Like, it's just I think ultimately it minimizes both of the players when you do that, which isn't necessary. Appreciate what Ovechkin's doing and what LeBron's doing. So it's
Yeah,
insane.
too. And like,
But yeah,
again, like,
First Take's falling off.
yeah, sorry, you broke
So,
up there again. Didn't mean to cut you up, but
You're
again,
good.
like to your point, like I went through the comments and like every single person was saying exactly what you said, which was like, why are we having this conversation? Like no one like in their right mind's actually making this argument here. So yeah, I feel like we both saw that and we're kind of like, that's weird, but it was just kind of like one of those weird moments where you see like the real like fast decline of like ESPN there